Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you don't have to go to work anymore. No alarm, no commute, no boss, no meetings, no Monday morning anxiety. For the first time in 40 years, your time belongs entirely to you. It sounds like freedom. And at first, it feels like freedom. You sleep later. You make coffee slowly. You take walks in the afternoon. You finally have time for the things you've been postponing. You tell your friends, I can't believe I waited this long. But then something strange happens. A few months pass, and you start checking your bank account more often. You hesitate before making dinner reservations. You think twice about visiting your children because the flight is expensive. You cancel a vacation because the market has been falling. And eventually, you begin wondering whether you actually retired, or simply exchanged one kind of job for another. Because there is a retirement trap that looks almost exactly like financial freedom, and millions of people can walk straight into it. Let's imagine you're 62, you've spent decades preparing, your house is mostly paid off. Your retirement accounts look healthy, you've accumulated savings, you have Social Security waiting for you. On paper, everything looks right. So you make the decision, you retire. Your coworkers congratulate you. Your final day feels almost unreal. You clean out your desk, shake hands, walk toward the parking lot. And for the first time in your adult life, nobody is waiting for you tomorrow morning. You drive home smiling. You think, this is it. The life I worked for has finally arrived. For several weeks, everything is wonderful. You cook breakfast, you work in the garden, you watch movies in the middle of the afternoon. You finally organize the garage. You visit friends. You take that trip you've been talking about for 10 years. Then the bills arrive, and suddenly, retirement feels different. The first problem isn't that you don't have enough money. The first problem is that you don't know how much you are allowed to spend. When you had a paycheck, spending money felt simple. You earned $6,000. You spent $4,500. The remaining amount stayed in the bank or went into investments. There was always another paycheck coming. Retirement changes the psychology completely. Now every dollar leaving your account feels permanent. You buy a new refrigerator. You think about it for 3 days. You need a new roof. You worry about it for 3 weeks. Your car needs repairs. You wonder whether you should postpone them. A vacation that once felt normal suddenly feels irresponsible. The money may be there, but psychologically, it feels like every purchase is making your future smaller. And that creates a strange form of poverty. You have money, but you're afraid to use it. This is where the retirement trap begins. You spent 40 years learning how to accumulate, but nobody taught you how to decumulate. You learn how to save, how to invest, how to increase your income, how to avoid debt. But retirement requires a completely different skill. You have to learn how to spend your money without constantly feeling guilty about it. That sounds easy. It isn't, because the same person who spent decades being rewarded for saving is suddenly asked to spend, and spending feels like losing. Your account balance falls, even when everything is going according to plan. You see $1 million become $980,000, then $950,000. You know intellectually that this is normal, but emotionally, it feels like failure. So you spend less, then less again. And eventually, you have created a retirement that is financially safe, but emotionally miserable. There's another part of this trap that nobody talks about. You may have spent your entire working life believing that retirement would solve your stress. But retirement doesn't automatically remove stress. Sometimes, it simply changes its name. Before retirement, the question was, will I have enough time? After retirement, it becomes, will I have enough money? Before, you worried about your boss. Now you worry about the market. Before, you watched the calendar. Now you watch your portfolio. Before, Friday meant freedom. Now Monday and Friday look almost identical. And that sounds wonderful. Until you realize that without a financial plan you trust, every day can become a financial decision. Should you go out for dinner? Should you replace the old car? Should you visit your children? Should you help with your grandchildren? Should you take the vacation you've been dreaming about? Every ordinary decision can suddenly feel like a withdrawal from your future. That's not the freedom you imagined. Now imagine another problem. You retired because you wanted freedom. But your lifestyle never changed. The large house remains, the property taxes remain, the insurance remains. 2 cars sit in the driveway. Subscriptions continue. Restaurant bills continue. Travel expectations continue. Your adult children still occasionally need help. Your monthly expenses are almost exactly what they were when you worked. Only one thing changed. The paycheck disappeared. Now your portfolio has to replace it. This is where many retirees make a mistake. They think retirement means replacing their salary. But retirement isn't about replacing every dollar you used to earn. It's about designing a life that requires fewer dollars. That distinction can change everything. Because if your lifestyle costs $100,000 every year, you may spend retirement worrying about producing $100,000. But if your lifestyle costs $60,000, the same portfolio suddenly feels much safer. The goal isn't always to earn more. Sometimes it's to need less. You may discover this when you look at your monthly expenses for the first time after retiring. There are things you expected: housing, utilities, food, insurance, healthcare, transportation. Then there are the quiet expenses, the memberships you barely use, the subscriptions you forgot about, the convenience services you adopted when you were working, the expensive habits that made sense when your time was limited. None of them feels large. Together, they can become enormous. And that's another reason retirement can feel unexpectedly expensive. Your working life may have been subsidizing convenience. When you had a salary, paying for convenience saved time. After retirement, you suddenly have more time than money. The trade-off has changed. You don't necessarily need the same services anymore. But habits are difficult to cancel. They become part of your definition of normal, and normal can be surprisingly expensive. There's another trap. It appears harmless. It even feels responsible. You decide to keep working part-time, just in case. You tell yourself it's temporary, maybe 10 hours a week, then 15. Then 20. The extra money feels good. Your savings stop declining. You feel safer. But slowly, the part-time job starts controlling your schedule. You can't take that trip because you have work. You can't visit your grandchildren because you have work. You can't spend 3 weeks somewhere because you have work. You are no longer working because you need the money. You're working because you're afraid to spend the money you already have. That's a very different thing. And it can be difficult to recognize, because everyone around you sees it as financial responsibility. But inside, you know something is wrong. You retired, yet you're still waiting for permission to live. Then comes the market downturn. It always seems to happen at the worst possible moment. You open your investment account one morning. The balance is down, not a little, a lot. You close the screen, then reopen it. The number hasn't changed. Your first thought isn't about stocks, it's about time. How many years can this money last? What if the market falls again? What if inflation stays high? What if healthcare costs increase? What if you live until 95? Suddenly, the retirement that felt secure 6 months ago feels fragile. You begin changing your behavior. You stop traveling. You delay home repairs. You avoid restaurants. You tell your family you're being careful. And slowly, your world becomes smaller. Not because you ran out of money, because fear convinced you that you might. This is where psychology becomes more important than mathematics. A spreadsheet can tell you that your retirement plan is sustainable, but a spreadsheet cannot tell you whether you'll feel comfortable spending the money. You can have a technically sound plan and still be afraid. You can have enough and still behave as if you're running out. That fear can become its own financial risk, because extreme fear may cause you to stop spending on things that genuinely matter. You delay medical care. You avoid visiting family. You stop repairing things that need to be repaired. You turn every enjoyable experience into a calculation. Eventually, the money may still be there, but the life you were saving it for is getting smaller. That's the irony. You protected the money by sacrificing the reason you wanted financial security in the first place. One afternoon, you meet an old friend for coffee. He retired 2 years ago. You expect him to complain about expenses. Instead, he looks relaxed. You ask him how retirement is going. He smiles. Better than I expected. You ask why. He explains that he changed his lifestyle before retiring. He sold the larger house, paid off the remaining debt, reduced the number of things he owned, stopped trying to keep up with people around him. Then he built a simple spending plan. He knows what his essentials cost. He knows what he can comfortably spend. And he has money specifically reserved for enjoying life, travel, family, restaurants, unexpected opportunities. He doesn't check his portfolio every morning. He checks his plan. There's a difference. His investments don't determine whether he's allowed to enjoy today. His plan does. And suddenly, you understand why he seems freer. Even though you may have more money than he does. His secret isn't that he eliminated uncertainty. He didn't. He simply gave uncertainty a place to live. There is money for emergencies. Money for emergencies. Money for long-term growth. And money for today. That separation changes the psychology. When you know the vacation fund is there for a vacation, spending it doesn't feel irresponsible. When you know your emergency reserve exists for emergencies, you don't need to panic every time the market moves. When you know your essential expenses are covered, you don't have to treat every dollar as sacred. The money finally has a purpose, and money with a purpose is much easier to spend than money without one. Freedom isn't having unlimited choices. Freedom is having enough margin to make choices without fear. You don't need the biggest house. You need a house that doesn't control your finances. You don't need the newest car. You need transportation that doesn't force you to keep working. You don't need a giant portfolio. You need a portfolio that fits the life you actually want. And perhaps most importantly, you don't need to eliminate every financial risk. You need to understand which risks matter and which fears are simply keeping you from living. Because there is no perfect retirement. There will always be uncertainty. Markets will fall. Cars will break. Roofs will leak. Medical expenses will happen. Plans will change. The goal isn't to create a life where nothing unexpected happens. The goal is to create a life where unexpected things don't destroy your ability to choose. Maybe that's the biggest misunderstanding about retirement. People think freedom begins when work ends. It doesn't. Work can end, and fear can continue. Freedom begins when your financial life becomes flexible enough to support your actual life. That might mean spending less. It might mean downsizing. It might mean delaying certain purchases. It might mean working a little longer. Or it might mean finally giving yourself permission to spend. There is no universal answer, because retirement isn't a number. It's a relationship between your money, your lifestyle, and your expectations. Get those three things aligned, and retirement can feel surprisingly peaceful. Ignore them, and even millions of dollars may not feel like enough. Years later, you may look back at the day you retired. You might remember the excitement, the final goodbye, the empty calendar, the first Monday morning when you didn't have to go anywhere. But perhaps the most important moment wasn't the day you stopped working. It was the day you stopped being afraid to use what you had spent your entire life building. You finally understood that money has two jobs. It protects your future, and it gives you the ability to live your present. If you only do the first, you may end up wealthy, but waiting for the perfect market, waiting for the perfect time, waiting till you're certain you have enough. But certainty never arrives. There will always be another reason to wait, another market correction, another headline, another expense, another fear. At some point, you have to decide what the money is actually for, because retirement isn't supposed to be the period of your life when you protect your money from life. It's supposed to be the period when your money finally gives life back to you. And that is the difference between retirement and financial freedom.